Eaton Fuller adjustment-free clutches, designed and engineered by Eaton Fuller. Verify that clutch torque is greater than engine torque. Read the label on the box. Verify flywheel opening 7-inch, 8.5-inch, 10-inch to ensure that the damper will fit into the flywheel cavity. Replace with the same type of damper. Solo is offered with dampers requiring a 7-inch, 8.5-inch, or 10-inch minimum opening. If you need to temporarily remove and then reinstall a Solo clutch, the following 9-step procedure must be performed prior to the clutch's removal from the flywheel. Failure to perform these steps will cause the Solo to drag or not release upon reinstallation. Please note, if the wear indicating tab is at or near the replace position, you can disregard the following 9-step process and install a new Solo clutch at this time. Also, if the Solo clutch was removed from the flywheel without first installing the 4 shipping bolts and you now wish to reinstall it, you must instead perform the out-of-vehicle resetting procedures described later in this video. The first step in the removal and reinstallation of a Solo clutch is to fully depress and hold the clutch pedal. Slide the wear indicating tab to the far left and hold at this new position. Let up on the clutch pedal and the tab will remain at the new position. Carefully remove the transmission, being sure to support its weight so that no damage will occur to the release bearing assembly or driven discs. Install the aligning tool into the clutch assembly. Because this assembly weighs approximately 150 pounds, it is recommended that a clutch jack be used when removing the clutch from the flywheel. Next, install 4 7/16" by 14 by 1 3/4 inch coarse thread machine screws finger tight, plus 1 full turn. These 4 shipping bolts will cage the pressure plate, thus preventing the 4 plate spacers from moving out of position when you remove the clutch from the flywheel. Carefully remove the clutch from the flywheel, being sure to mark all the clutch parts so they can be properly reoriented during reinstallation. Inspect the ceramic buttons and their mating parts for an oily or grease-covered condition, being sure to eliminate the source of this contamination before the clutch is reinstalled. Please note, Eaton Fuller does not recommend the reuse of contaminated discs. You must replace with new discs. Using a 5/8" wrench, progressively tighten the 4 shipping bolts in a crisscross pattern until the face of the pressure plate is 1 3/4 inch minimum below the mounting surface. Important: failure to perform this step properly may cause the Solo clutch to drag or not release upon reinstallation. Reinstall the clutch according to the Solo installation procedures shown later in this video, being careful to properly reorient the clutch parts. If the Solo clutch will not be reinstalled, you need to perform only steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the previous section before proceeding to the installation section shown later in this video. Begin by wiping all surfaces which the gauging will contact. Secure the dial indicator to the flywheel housing touching the flywheel surface. Rotate the flywheel 1 rotation and measure total indicated runout. The maximum allowed is 0.008 of an inch, 0.008 or less. Measure the pilot bearing bore. Maximum allowed is 0.005, 0.005 inches. Measure the face of the flywheel housing, then measure the inside diameter of the housing. The maximum allowed is 0.008, 0.008 inches. Install a new premium C3, C4, C5 fit pilot bearing with high temperature grease and Viton seals. This will ensure long pilot bearing life. Inspect for wear at the cross shaft and bushing areas and at the fingers of the release yoke. Replace any parts which are worn excessively. Next, check for wear and roughness at the transmission bearing retainer cap. Refer to the installation and adjustment instructions packaged with the clutch for the acceptable amount of wear on this cap. Check the input shaft splines and replace if any wear is noticed. Any wear on the splines will prevent the newly installed driven discs from sliding freely, causing a drag or poor release complaint. Also check the stub of the input shaft for any damage from the pilot bearing. Replace if damaged or worn excessively. Next, check the non-splined area of the input shaft for any wear or roughness from a previous sleeve bushing failure. Roughness in this area will cause the sleeve bushing of the new clutch to fail. Always install a new input shaft if this condition exists. Install a new Eaton Fuller clutch brake at this time. It does not matter which side you orient toward the transmission. The heavy-duty Solo adjustment-free clutch is available in two different versions, the standard Solo and the XL or extended lube version. The first type is our original adjustment-free clutch, which utilizes a standard release yoke to disengage the clutch. It has a greasable release bearing which requires lubrication after every 10,000 miles. The second type of Solo clutch is called the XL, or extended lube version. It requires lubrication every 50,000 miles. The two cast ribs on its release bearing housing identify this clutch as the XL version. The XL version requires the use of a special release yoke in the place of the standard type yoke. This yoke can only be used with the XL Solo. This roller yoke must be installed with the engine side notation facing the engine. Because a new roller yoke is always packaged with these clutches, it is always recommended that it be installed with the new clutch. Refer to the label on the outside of the clutch box to determine which version of the heavy-duty Solo you are installing. There are three sizes of flywheel openings. If the opening is 7 inches, you must use a Solo with an 8-spring damper. If the flywheel opening is 8.5 inches, then a Solo with a 10-spring damper should be used. If the flywheel opening is greater than 9 3/4 inches, then a 6 or 7-spring damper should be installed, the exception being Mack trucks with Mack engines, which require a special 9-spring damper. Installing too large of a damper in too small of an opening will cause the following conditions. 1. The Solo's release bearing will be too close to the clutch brake, which will prevent the Solo from setting up, and 2. The clutch won't release due to insufficient bearing travel and also due to interference between the front disc and the flywheel. Once you have confirmed that the driven disc damper will fit into the flywheel opening, you must next verify that the engine's peak torque does not exceed the clutch's torque rating. Refer to the label on the outside of the clutch box for the clutch's torque rating. In traditional clutches, when the clutch facing gets worn, the bearing slides toward the clutch, resulting in loss of free pedal and the need for an adjustment. But the Solo clutch compensates for wear through a patented sliding cam technology. Above the pressure plate, there are two interlocking cams. The top one is attached to a high-tensile spring, which is anchored on the other end to the clutch cover. Also on the clutch cover are 4 plate spacers, situated at equal intervals around the surface. So how do all these parts work together? Quite ingeniously. When the bearing is released, the plate spacers sense for wear. If wear has occurred, the spacers release the load on the cams, allowing the spring to engage. The spring pulls the top cam across the bottom one, which pushes the clutch discs back out to their original position. Thus, the clutch is continually kept in perfect adjustment. What's more, there's a tab permanently attached to the top cam that is visible through a slot in the clutch cover. When the cam slides, the tab moves with it, revealing at a glance how much wear has occurred. This allows you to plan ahead and do maintenance when it's preventive rather than imperative. The cast cover can be easily broken if mishandled and dropped. The discs can be easily bent or distorted. Never let a transmission hang on the discs or apply excessive force during the transmission installation. If the discs are distorted, the clutch will not release. Note the markings on the components. They are marked in various ways. For example, flywheel side, pressure plate side, intermediate plate side. Many clutches use the same disc in the front and rear positions, and these will be marked intermediate plate side. The new 6 spring can be installed in any direction. A disc incorrectly installed will cause a no-release condition and could damage the discs. A solo assembly weighs approximately 150 pounds, and the use of a clutch jack is recommended. Place cover assembly on input shaft. Place rear disc on shaft. Note markings on disc, pressure plate side or intermediate plate side. Place intermediate plate in cover slots with roll pins flush on pressure plate side and protruding toward flywheel side. Install front disc, again noting